Corsair,
Apple Floppy Days,
Commodore,
Tandy Floppy Days,
Atari,
TI Floppy Days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free.
those floppy days,
The games we play, you shared with me.
those days,
Motorola Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC Floppy Days, SD Amiga Floppy Days, Junior Sinclair Floppy Days, Classic Days, Microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free.
those floppy days,
The games we play, you shared with me.
those days,
These floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
I know we talked earlier, we talked before about, particularly around the ZX80 and ZX81 work that you did before. And I wanted to really focus more on the ZX Spectrum this time because I've got an episode coming up on the ZX Spectrum. Maybe you can start off, I know you already talked about this a little the last time, but maybe let's start off again with where you're located and what you work on today, John.
Well, we're located just north of Cambridge, England. And sorry, what was it you were asking? I didn't quite catch.
What do you do today?
Oh, what I do today? Oh, that's a long story. But I suppose it began when, we have been working for Clive and doing some other software contracts. And the problem with software contracts is that you can never know how long it's going to take, and you always underestimate. So we thought, wouldn't it be nice to actually just be making boxes that we knew what they cost us to make, and we could set a price, and that would be so much easier. So we started doing that with digital network boxes. And we had a digital network pretty much before most of the networks that are around, and we started making interfaces for different kinds of PCs, so that people could have what was the one before we had PCs? CPM machines on their desks, and a Unix machine as a server. And it all connected together in a way that was nice and convenient for them. And I'm not sure things are that convenient these days, but hey. And pretty much been doing stuff with digital networking ever since. And we got into audio and video over a technology back then that was called ATM, which didn't make it for various reasons, almost none of which were technical, and that then developed on from what we were doing there to something that does audio and video so much better than IP does, and still trying to get that into the mainstream, and chairing a standards group.
That probably keeps you pretty busy, I imagine.
It keeps me out of mischief.
Can you tell us one thing? I don't think I talked about this the last time with you. Can you give me, or give the listeners an idea of where the name Nine Tiles came from, which was the company that you founded and worked for when you were doing all this work for Sinclair?
We needed to have a name to start the company. So this was before Sinclair, but we needed to have a name. And you had to give three options, I think. And the first two options we chose, they said we couldn't have because it made us sound too great, and sort of Cambridge software or something like that. As our third choice as banker, because we played a lot of mahjong in those days, and we thought, well, one of the hands that scores the maximum is calling 9 tiles hand. Now, there is a bit about that on the bottom of the front page of the 9 tiles website, actually. It made a sort of a nice instant logo, and so long as all the product names were 9 characters, which wasn't a big problem, because most product names are 8, 9, or 10, if you think about it.
Mhm.
So that seemed a good idea, and so that was what we had.
Okay.
And that was what we stuck with, and I'm really quite glad, because obviously we didn't know the internet was coming and search engines, but if you search for 9 tiles, there we are up at the top without having done any SEO. And you think, suppose we'd been called Virgin.
Right. Right. That's kind of a unique name, so that's a good thing.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, if you would kind of tell us how the work with the Spectrum came about. When did Sinclair approach you about the ZX Spectrum and doing work for that?
Well, I guess it must have been right after the ZX81 was done and dusted, I think.
Oh, was it immediately after? Okay.
I would have thought so, because he was bringing out one a year, and I'm sure as soon as we got the 81 done, we'd have been starting on the Spectrum, and he'd have been starting to think what he wanted.
So it was a continual set of work that you did for Sinclair. You moved right from ZX80 into the 81 to the Spectrum, basically?
As far as I remember it, I mean, yeah, they may.
Okay.
We probably didn't start work the day after we certainly didn't start work on the 81 the day after we sent the ZX80 software off to be made into a ROM. But yeah, I'm sure we started thinking about it pretty soon.
Well, I hope you took a vacation in there in between or something.
We probably did, yes.
So tell us about what sort of work did you guys actually do for the ZX Spectrum? Was it almost entirely the basic ROM, or was there other work that you did as well?
We only did the software. The hardware, I guess he did in-house, actually. Because there was, we had Steve Vickers on our side working on it, and name's gone, isn't it? The two who went off and did the Jupiter race.
Right. I had the name in front of me here, and now
Yes, I did.
It
always happens when you
Richard Altwasser.
Altwasser, that's right. Yeah, so Richard was, as far as I know, employed by Clive, and he was doing the hardware. I'm sure they had other people there as well, but as far as we were concerned, the hardware was something that either we went and fetched, or, as I remember happening, it got sent out to us in a taxi.
So what were some of the challenges in writing the basic ROM for the ZX Spectrum as compared to the work you'd done before?
Well, we didn't really do anything on the basic, which was a little bit of an issue, because when we did the 80, you had to fit it in that 4K of ROM, and And so you had to be very, very lean in the software. And it was things like, okay, you have the basic program in memory, and you want to, you have the basic program in memory, and you need to things like when you have to go to a particular instruction, you have to find that instruction. And what you ought to do is to have some kind of index that that jumps you, that tells you where that instruction is. Whereas we simply had all the instructions in memory, and you searched through them. And if you'd only got 1K of memory, that didn't take very long. And if you've got 48K of memory, it takes rather longer. So I was telling Clive, look, we really need to do a bit of rewriting, and because the 80 had 4K of ROM, the 81 had 8K, and so the other 4K was all the floating point stuff. And now we've got another 8K. So and indeed in practice, we never filled it. So I was saying we really ought to take advantage of that and rewrite it so that it goes faster. And Clive said, oh, that's going to cost money. We can't do that. So we didn't. And I think the basic probably is fairly slow, but since pretty much all the software that was sold for it was in assembler anyway, it probably didn't matter. But the kind of things that went in there, because you didn't have color on the 81, did you? So there was all the color stuff, which I think Steve did most of, but again, I can't quite remember. And there were some peripherals. So there was a print. Did the 81 have a printer?
I'm not sure. I think there might have been, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, but certainly I'm sure there was a printer driver, and I don't remember what there was in the way of. I don't think they had any kind of network interface, but they did. They did have a serial interface, which was a little card that plugged in at the back, and in those days, serial interfaces had to have plus 12 and minus 12 volt power supplies, which it was only fed with 5 volts. And so there was a little circuit on the board that that made the plus and minus 12 from that. And anyway, yeah, they sent us out one of these boards, and we plugged it into one of the Spectrum that we had. And the Spectrum wouldn't start up, and it turned out that the DRAM had blown up. The DRAM had stopped working. But that wasn't unusual with the Spectrum, particularly the early ones, because the DRAM was pretty fragile. So it was, oh, well, we maybe better send you, we'll send you another Spectrum. So we tried it with another one, and that one stopped working as well. And then they said, oh, well, maybe it's the serial board. And so either they had that back or they tried it with another one that they got. And they found that there was a short circuit somewhere that was feeding this plus 12 back into one of the signals that went to the RAM. So the RAM was being fed 12 volts when it only coped with 5, and that was what was blowing it up. So anyway, once that had been sorted out, yeah, we could do the driver for the serial card. But as I recall, we didn't get that done in time for them they wanted to have the thing out on the street before that, so it didn't make it into the first version of the ROM, but it made it into subsequent versions of the ROM, I think. And there was some way you could we made it so that you could download a driver for it with the first one. But again, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, so what I've read is that there was really the ROM wasn't as complete, I guess, as you guys wanted it to be at the time the launch occurred.
Yeah.
And there were plans to kind of finish that up after the launch, but it was so popular that you never got an opportunity really to kind of finish that and get it out to everyone because it was already in too many hands at that point. Is that accurate? Is that the way you remember it?
I think it was partly that. It was probably partly that Clive worked out that it was selling so well in its current form that he didn't need to do anything else.
Me too. Yeah.
Because the other thing that was being developed for it was that little mag tape thing with the tiny thin mag tape that was in was a loop of tape in a little cassette. What was it? Was it called the micro drive? And
that very well could be. Yeah.
It was Ben Cheese who was working on that, and he was another of Clive's employees, and he died quite young, not long after. But yeah, Ben was working on the hardware of this drive, and I think I had quite a long time kind of, there would be a new version of the hardware, and you would then try and get some software that could get it to work, and you would find that there were things that it wasn't that great at, which you couldn't cover up with the software, as it were. So we never got it to be reliable. But I think it did finish up in the QL. I think at that stage with the Spectrum, it was about version 5 or version 6, and I have a vague idea that version 9 actually worked in the QL. So maybe it did, but of course the QL is another story.
Right. Anything else you remember about working on that ROM for the Spectrum? Any challenges you ran into, or any other stories around its release? And I mean, part of the story says that you continued to work on it after the launch for a while. I assume Sinclair was continuing to pay you to work on it, but then did that work just end up getting dropped, or did you end up using that on the QL, or how?
I think that must have been the drivers for the serial card and for the micro drive, and maybe the printer. As I certainly, at least some of those were after the first version of the ROM. And I'm sure he was sort of paying us by the hour.
So you say you were working on those drivers after the first version of the ROM, but whatever happened with that code? Did it get back into the ROM, or?
Yeah, I think there was another version that had it in.
Okay.
And I can't remember. There may even have been another socket for sort of where you could retrofit, or maybe people were offered that they could have the Mark II ROM to kind of swap, because I think it may well have been socketed. But yeah, I'm a bit vague on that.
I know it was 40 years ago, so it was it was a long time. In fact, the Spectrum has its 40th anniversary this year. have you been paying attention to that? And have you?
I was aware of it. Over here in England, there was a bit of an event in the Computing Museum at Bletchley Park. You know that one? Bletchley Park is where they had, well, it's really where computing started, I think, with all the code cracking during the war. And I mean, yeah, Bletchley Park is a story in itself. But there's a museum there that's got a reconstruction of one of the machines they used, and has got a whole lot of other computer memorabilia. And as far as I can tell, is pretty much in competition with the Computer History Museum, which is in Cambridge. Yeah, they had an event on the day, which Steve Vickers and Richard Altwasser were involved in, but I wasn't. The one in Cambridge is aiming to have an event later this year, celebrating all the computers that were launched in 1982. They've got a list of about 50, I think. You can look it up on their website.
Yeah, there were a lot introduced in 1982 around the world. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, yes, so we were doing that, and then there was a point where Clive said, yeah, we have to put the Mark II ROM to bed, so we can't go on doing any more development of the Spectrum. And he had this idea for the QL. And at that time, he had an office in Portugal Place, which is, there are various locations around Cambridge where Clive had offices at different times. So this is another part of the city centre than 6A King's Parade, which is where the ZX80 was done. But I remember going to his office in Portugal Place and Clive saying, the people who sell us the chips are cutting their price, and we want you to cut the price of the software. And I said, well, hold on, Clive. They're cutting the price because because they're selling you bigger quantities, whereas the software is a one cost.
It's all different, isn't it? Yeah.
And I said, if you want something like a royalty deal where we get, so much per copy of the ROM, then yeah, we can talk about it. And he said, I'm not telling you how many I'm selling. I said, oh. And that's kind of where the conversation ended. But by then, he'd made quite a lot of money out of the Spectrum, so he thought he could, hire a team and do it all in-house and do the QL in-house. And then there was this long pause, and eventually the QL came out.
So you retained rights to the Spectrum ROM then, I guess, or Nine Tiles did, right?
Oh, that story, yes. Did I not tell you that last time?
I don't recall whether you did the last time or not, but I'd love to hear it again.
Okay. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of paperwork involved with us contracting to him, so it was all. There must have been something in writing, but there wasn't a contract that included us signing over the copyright to him. And nobody really worried too much about that sort of thing in those days. So we didn't. And yeah, we it was when he was selling the Spectrum to Amstrad. And Amstrad did their due diligence and said, as far as we can tell, you don't actually own the software. He said, oh. They said, as far as we can tell, 9 Tiles still own the software. It was never transferred across. And this happened on it was at a weekend. I'm pretty sure it was a bank holiday weekend. And we'd taken the family away on the canal boat. And we told various people where we were going, and we sort of, said a few things about it. So I think, we'd said, there were people who knew where we kept the boat, and we'd said we were going down a flight of 7 locks. So they would say, oh, that must be Long Buckby. And anyway, Jim Westwood drove over to where the canal is and walked all along the towpath looking for the boat. And we worked out afterwards that if he'd gone round one more corner, he'd have found us. This, of course, was in the days before mobile phones or anything like that. Anyway, we got back on, if it was a bank holiday, on the Monday or otherwise on the Sunday night. And before we'd been in very long, the phone rang. And they were wanting us to sign this over. And we said, okay, well, how much is that going to be? And I think I'm sure we certainly consulted various people as to how much it would be worth. And, a figure was mentioned, and we said, well, it's not a huge amount. To which the advice was, it's all they can afford. If you want more, that will kill the deal. Now, whether that was so, I don't know. But anyway, so we then sold the rights to them, and then the deal went ahead.
To Amstrad?
With Amstrad.
Okay, so I guess the next question I had for you, so I know, as we talked about, Richard, is it pronounced Altwasser?
Yeah.
Altwasser?
I would always pronounce it Altwasser, as if it's German.
Altwasser? Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
He was with Sinclair. He did the hardware side of things. Did you have much back and forth with him when you were writing the software to maybe understand and ask questions and why things were designed certain ways and that sort of thing?
Not a lot, because there wasn't a lot of hardware that you really interacted with. So there was the computer, and I'm not thinking, it wasn't like other things that I did that were embedded processors where most of what the code did was interacting with hardware. Certainly the video was done pretty much the same way in all of them, I think. And we certainly knew how the video was done. And in the 80s, certainly there was this issue that the scanning of the keyboard had to be exactly the right length, because it defined the length of frame sync. I'm sure we had conversations about the hardware, but there wasn't anything very very complex in the hardware that we would need to have a lot of discussion about.
Okay, that's fair. So I understand that you donated to the Center for Computing History the original build of the ZX Spectrum that you guys had and worked off of.
Yeah, they
Can
were
you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they were very excited about that.
Yeah.
This was really a way of clearing our attic out.
Okay. So it was just a rough prototype, right?
It was very much breadboarded.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure they've got photographs of it on their website.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they were very excited to get that. And I mean, how long was that in your attic? Ever since 1982, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Or 1981?
And I'm not sure, you said donated, perhaps some loan would be better.
Oh, it's on loan?
I can't remember what the paperwork was, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that the only prototype you had? Was just that one?
no, there's I mean, we had some PDP-11s as well, which they've got, and there were there's a prototype of something. It was called the Cat, I think, which never saw the light of day. We had a contract to design it, but then the project to actually market it, I think it was something like, by the time it was designed, the market had moved on. But and then they've got prototypes of quite a few of the network cards that we did.
Okay. But that was the only Spectrum prototype you had, was just that one.
I think that was the prototype, I think. Once it was a way of getting the software developed while they were designing the real hardware. And then once the real hardware came along, we had several of those until they ran.
Do you have any spec? I probably asked you this the last time, but I don't recall. Do you have any Spectrums actually in your home anywhere other than that prototype that you loaned to the Center for Computing History? Do you have any other Spectrums in your home?
I don't think so.
No. I see a couple of old tube monitors behind you there. I didn't know if maybe you had some vintage computers tied to those or not.
Those don't go with the Spectrum.
Okay.
No, I'm pretty sure that anything like that went up in the attic.
Okay. I'd like to.
It's only much more recent platforms that I've got here.
Yeah. Okay. At some point, I would also love to talk with you about the Grundy New Brain. I understand you did some work on that.
Yeah, we went on working on. Sorry, how much of the? Shall I start at the beginning with the New Brain?
I actually, if you don't mind, maybe we can schedule another time to do that. That's another one I want to cover this year. Would that be okay if we just scheduled a different time to talk about the Grundy New Brain?
I'm not sure it would fill an hour. But,
well, that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't have to. Are there any other questions I should have asked about the Spectrum or the work that you guys did on the Spectrum?
Probably. I can't think of too much else.
Okay. Anything you want to say to the audience? I think I've pretty much run out of questions regarding the Spectrum. Anything else you want to say to the audience about the work that you did back then?
I think we've covered everything pretty much.
Okay. Well, you
yeah,
guys did some amazing work. I know the Sinclair Basic that you guys developed pretty much became a standard, it seems like, and I'm sure you're pretty proud of the work that you did from,
yeah, I mean,
you
there
know,
was some good
40
stuff
years
in
ago.
there. And there was. I'm quite proud of the software that reads that scans the keyboard, because not only, as I say, it had to define the length of frame sync in the video signal, but I think it actually made that keyboard usable, in a way that sometimes with keyboards, you start thinking, they've just kind of done the obvious with the software, and so it's things like you get a lot of bouncing where as you push the key down, so it doesn't just go from no contact to contact. It goes sort of in and out for a bit, and particularly as you let it up, it goes in and out, and particularly with those sorts of keyboards. And once you realize that, okay, if you see a signal there, then the key must be pressed. So on the way down, you say, yeah, this key is pressed as soon as you see it down. Whereas on the way up, you wait for some time until you haven't seen it for a while before you decide, yeah, it really is up. And that way you don't get spurious repeats.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense.
But as I say, there are other keyboards that I've used with proper keys.
Yeah, the keyboard on that machine was interesting. That first machine was rather interesting. It wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but it was better than what was on the ZX80 and 81, though. Better keyboard.
Yeah.
So, okay, John. Well, I appreciate your time. If you don't mind, I'll schedule another time later and we can talk about the Grundy New Brain, but I really appreciate you spending some time.
You don't want to do that?
I really don't want. Yeah, if you're okay with that, I would really rather do it another time.
Okay.
I'm still in the middle of my workday here, so I've got other things I need to jump off to.
Yeah, sure.
So
yeah.
Thank you very much. All right, well, thank you very much, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day. I really appreciate it. It's been great talking with you again.
Okay.
See you later.